First, I want to say it's an honor to be standing in front of you here today, especially when a former student actually nominates you, then you knew you did something right. So that's always a good sign. So I'm starting my 21st year at LSU, and I've been proud to be at the university for the past 20 years. You know that I wasn't born and raised in Louisiana, but I married a girl from down the bayou, so now I can officially say that I'm a Louisianian. Now, with that being said, I didn't believe the concept of down the bayou. I thought she just said that on our first date. So as I went to go meet her mother for the first time, we went down Highway 90, and sure enough, there was a sign, up the bayou and down the bayou. Sure enough, it's a real thing. So, I have 4 kids, aged 14 to 18, and I've raised all of my kids here in the state of Louisiana. So, I'm a Louisianan, not by birth, but by adoption, and I'm glad to say that. Now, what's really interesting is when Pierce approached me about talking about AI, I gladly accepted the invitation. And the reason why is that if you received this invitation to come today, you probably had some sort of a reaction. You may have said, AI, what's that? Like, I hear it in all the news, right? And if you pay attention, it's everywhere. We even have a joke in the business school. You have a startup, all you have to do is stand up and say AI, 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 and sit down, and they'll give you $5 million. It's not quite that easy, but that's the running joke today. But then there's some of you who hear that, and you start to get concerned. You almost start to feel like the Terminator, right? Now, funny enough, I make that joke with my students, and they don't get it. But the Terminator, afraid of the cyborgs coming over to take over the world. So the question is that what AI is all about? So what I want to do today is spend a few minutes really talking about and demystifying what AI really is. And then with that understanding, let's kind of start to have a discussion about the pros and the cons, the good and the bad of AI. I'm not here to put forth a position. I'm not here to tell you it's wonderful or to be scared. I'm here just to talk about the good and the bad and let you kind of decide for yourself how you feel. So let's start with, as a good academic does, what is generative AI? So generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that's capable of generating text, images, or other media in response to prompts. Generative AI models learn the pattern and the structure of data and then generate new data based upon those characteristics. Now, when we talk about the concept of artificial intelligence or AI, we have to put those in quotes. It's not true intelligence. It's artificial intelligence. In other words, AI can only learn and generate new insight based upon what you feed it. So you have to train the model in order for it to understand the patterns in the model, in order for it to predict the future. And that's really an important concept to understand. You have to understand the genesis of where it comes from. Now, if you pay attention to the news, the biggest one we've all heard of is ChatGPT. Now, many of you here probably have never used ChatGPT before, so what I wanted to start with is I wanted to show you what ChatGPT actually looks like. So I went into ChatGPT, see if it works, there you go, and I said, tell me about the Rotary Club of Baton Rouge. And so you see here that it's going to spit out some information about what it views as the Rotary Club of Baton Rouge. What's really interesting is generative. It's generating that response back, and it's conversational. Now, if you say, well, why did this all come into being now? Why now are we starting to see this? There's a lot of reasons why, but one reason is we've been trained to talk to our technology. Think about your Alexa or your Google Home. We're used to talking. So this is just the latest iteration of those types of conversations that we've all had. Now, ChatGPT is just one of the most common kind. The other is Bard. Bard was put out by Google. So I gave it the same response. It's a little different. It thinks for a minute, and then it's going to spit back out some information. So it's going to regurgitate back based on what it's been trained. All right, so now you kind of understand a little bit of how Bard and ChatGPT work. So let's kind of begin to talk about how this works and what this looks like. First, a quote. I don't need Google anymore. Why would I use Google when I can just go to ChatGPT to help me through all the search results and give me the answer? Who said this? My daughter at 13. So this shows you the kind of thinking that our teenagers are now dealing with. It's no more about Google. This has created many a conversation around the dinner table. And LSU is not without controversy, as we know. Olivia Dunn, need to get my creativity flowing at midnight, and then she promoted Cactus AI. That unfortunately spawned a lot of conversation across campuses across the world. The AP said, Olivia Dunn just endorsed AI. Is that a problem? The Sports Illustrated got in it. It said that LSU had to issue a statement. And sure enough, LSU did. We said that academic integrity is of the utmost importance. And one thing I can validate for you is this is true. From top to bottom, your faculty at higher institutions are taking this extremely seriously, and we're starting to teach our students this world of AI and what it means. All right, so where did ChatGPT actually come from? In 2015, major tech players like AWS and a bunch of other companies came together to create OpenAI. The idea was the democratization of AI. They wanted this to be available for free to all. In 2016, there was extensive hiring. They were paying basically NFL salaries for these scientists to generate OpenAI. In 2017, they were spending almost $8 million on the servers alone just to generate this AI. Also in 2018, Elon Musk resigned his seat at the table there because he wanted to focus on Tesla. So that just gives you an indication of the types of people that were involved. Well, things changed in 2019. Microsoft decided to invest $1 billion, with a B, into OpenAI. That changed the business model. No longer was it a nonprofit, now it's a for-profit company because the money became real. But that created a lot of conflict within ChatGPT because it was supposed to be the democratization of AI, and now it was about the money of AI. In 2020, they started to release their first models, and what we saw along the way is Microsoft is continuing to pump more money into ChatGPT. If you go on Bing and you try to search for something, on the back end of that is ChatGPT. If you look at the upcoming versions of Office 365, as you're typing along and it predicts what they think you're going to say, that is ChatGPT. And I think everyone in here is old enough to remember Clippy. Clippy may be coming back, powered by ChatGPT. My students don't understand that reference either. All right, so here's what's so interesting from a business innovation professor's perspective. How quickly did it take ChatGPT to get 1 million users? It took Netflix 3.5 years. It took Facebook 10 months. It took Spotify 5 months. It took Instagram 2 months. It took ChatGPT 5 days. So the pace of innovation in this space is accelerating quickly. So let's get some facts about ChatGPT. 51% of professionals in the IT sector say at some point this year we'll see a hack that's started by ChatGPT. ChatGPT has passed the med school exam and gotten into Wharton. It costs them $100,000 a day to run ChatGPT. So, where'd it come from? Well, like I said, it needs data. So where's the data from ChatGPT? It came from 8 years of raw data just from the web. It came up from links from Reddit for the past 3 years. Then it came from internet-based books and Wikipedia in English. Now the reason why that's important is if you want to understand the output, you have to understand the input. I think we'll all agree that Reddit is not exactly the bastion of free thought. So when we think about ChatGPT, just keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that Wikipedia was only fed in English. So when we start to think about diversity of thought and diversity of opinions that ChatGPT is generating, we have to be cautious in understanding this because we have to understand where it came from. And what they did is they fed all of this data and they tried to use the computer to make sense of the English that they were feeding into it. They studied 175 billion parameters around all of this information. How big is this? 300 billion words were fed into ChatGPT, 560 gigs of data, and 175 billion parameters. Now, what's so interesting is that technology that's revolutionized the world was generated with less data than your hard drive probably can hold. If you have a terabyte hard drive, you could hold ChatGPT almost 2 times. Bard, we have no idea. Bard, Google will not tell us what was used to generate their system. So, take it with a grain of salt. All right, so this is my question to you. Can you see the difference between ChatGPT and what a student has come up with? I have 3 different things here. I have one that a student generated, I have one that ChatGPT generated, and I have one that Bard generated. Here is the literal prompt. We are currently living in a platformed economy. Consumer-facing platforms for everything, like Airbnb and Uber. So what I wanted to see is, can ChatGPT come up with an idea like Uber? So, 3 different prompts. Prompt number 1, fuel service. When you run out of gas, something like AAA can help. So maybe we can Uberize gas delivery. That's option A. Option B, personalized fitness training. Think about like fitness training on demand. You can go in, you can look through profiles, you can look through credentials, you can look at reviews, and you can decide upon your fitness trainer. Concept C, personal assistance. Now you can hire a personal assistant, just like you do in Uber. A, B, C, fuel service versus fitness versus personal assistant. I'm not going to ask you to show hands, but in your mind you can think about it. The student was A. ChatGPT and ChatGPT and Bard came up with ideas comparable to or better than a student was able to generate. And academic research so far has found that new product development teams are not as strong in generating new ideas to go to market as ChatGPT and ChatGPT and Bard. All right, what are the limitations? So I decided to ask, what will LSU's record be this year for football? ChatGPT has no idea, because last time they fed them data is 2021. Bard, 8-5. All right. What's interesting is, I won't go through it all, but if you read it, they reason through why this is true. If they go 8-5 this year, remember this conversation. All right, so let's talk. So now we have an understanding of it. Let's talk a little bit about the implications and what this means. ChatGPT's deepest flaw is the absence of intelligence. It not only says what is the case, what was the case, and what will be the case, but what's not the case and what could not be the case. Those are the marks of intelligence. Because really the foundation of AI, as Herb Simon said almost 50 years ago, AI has 2 purposes. One is to use the power of computers to augment thinking, just as like we use a computer to run a car. The other is to use it to understand how humans think, to model how they think, to make better sense of it. So what does that mean? Well, really, historically speaking, the foundation of AI comes from a cognitive psychology view of understanding human beings. The concept is that humans operate within a space. We take an input, we kind of process what's going on based upon what the facts on the ground are in our experiences, and then we have some sort of output. And that's what ChatGPT is based upon. It's feeding it data, it's looking for patterns, and then it's spitting it back out again. Now, a number of years ago, a famous professor came up with what's called the Turing test. The Turing test said this: if you see the screen on the left-hand side as a human behind a screen, and I fed you something, could you tell if what was fed to you came from a computer or if it came from a person? The reason why everyone is so excited now is for the first time, as we saw with our examples, it's indiscernible between what a human can produce and what the technology can produce. So we're starting to see that AI is caught up to actually pass the Turing test. And that's the seminal moment in what we talk about AI. Because it's about the relationship we have between us and knowledge. So we need to think about how we generate knowledge, because that's the foundation of AI. So what we're doing here is every human, and that's us in the middle, we confront challenges, and we figure out what problems to solve. Then we develop solutions. One of the limitations of AI is it can't generate the problems. It's generative AI. We're feeding it the problem for it to solve. So we have to keep that limitation in mind as we talk about the foundations of AI. Because what we're able to do is take data, shape that data using our concepts of the world, and learn from experience as we get new facts. And we're trying to do this to act rationally. But the problem is, what does it mean to act rationally? Can you train technology to act like a human, or to think like a human, or have emotions like a human? Despite her, we're not at that point yet. AI, though, that's more scalable. It has the ability to improve. But we learn from experience. We learn from training. We understand context, and we know what questions to ask back. That's the difference between the technology and humans. So at the foundation of AI is what's called deep learning. You're feeding it data. It's learning about that data. Then you're feeding it new data, and based upon the data you fed it before, it's trying to make sense of the world around you. So you have to get data, you have to feed it in, it has to make sense of it, has to test it, and has to prepare it for new circumstances. One of the challenges of AI, and one of my startups that we're having, is we're trying to predict behavior. But the problem is, in order for me to predict the behavior, that behavior has to already be in the data. So we have to basically create the data to show it what data we need it to find. So keep that in mind. All right, business professor side of me, right? How are companies thinking about AI? So we did a study. We decided to see why companies are adopting AI. So traditionally, when you think about organizations, they basically adopt technology that aligns with their strategy, their operations, and it makes them more effective. So we did a study with 96 presidents and CEOs across the company. Most of them had over $1 billion. They're spread across different industries. They had over 14 years of experience as presidents. So these were people with deep experience. And we had 10 different attributes of the technology itself. And I know that I'm going through this quickly for time reasons. I'd be happy to talk about this for another hour. But unlike my class, I have a timeline here. So what we were trying to find out is trade-offs. What if I told you it would improve your bottom line, but it would hurt jobs? What if it would make your operations more effective, but it's ethically kind of questionable? What's driving you to adopt AI? Now, what's really interesting is, one time in 20 years, have I ever had a study that stopped me dead in my tracks? This was it. The number one reason why organizations are adopting AI is to improve the well-being of their employees. They want to actually make employee life better. Now, the cynic in you will say, well, that's post-COVID. That's a post-COVID issue. I would argue, I'm not sure that that's true. Because what I'm starting to teach in my class and try to understand is not only how do we make companies better, but how can we use technology not to replace your job, but to make your job better. And all the CEOs and IT people that I'm talking to have the same conversation. I don't want to automate your job. I want to reorient your job and make it better. And that to me is the hope and the promise that comes along with these types of opportunities, right? Here's the concern that I have. At the state level, if we look at the top areas that are being disrupted by AI, what we see is finance, manufacturing, healthcare, and retail. That sounds a lot like a lot of the issues that we depend upon as a state. And this is what is causing me a little bit of concern. So I'm going to end here with concerns and optimism. Concerns. I'm worried that the state needs to make sure that we prepare for this shift. This is the fourth revolution, And we're going to see a shift in how we do business. And we need to make sure that we think about that as we move forward. We need to invest in education. We need to upskill. We need to focus on industry-based certifications. We need to make sure we have a good, strong climate for business innovation. Those are the areas that are going to allow us to move forward in this area of AI. And the optimism in me knows that this is true. I know that Louisianans are resilient people, and I know we can do this. At the federal level, we saw early on that the White House put forth an AI Bill of Rights. That's not far enough. We will see regulation around AI. If you want to see where it's going to start, look in Europe first. In about a month, when we all get new iPhones because of USB-C, it's because Europe made Apple do that. I have a feeling we're going to see Europe put a lot of pressure on AI companies to be more transparent, and that we're going to start to see a lot more parameters around AI. I'm concerned, but if you look at, for example, social media companies are governed by what's called Section 230 of the law. It says that if you go on social media and say something wrong, the social media company cannot be held legally responsible. Well, the question is, how is this going to work for AI? Because they're just taking the information and feeding it into an algorithm. If the algorithm spits out stuff that causes something nefarious, who's going to be held responsible if we can't trace it back to the original source? This is a concern. We have to worry about the role of foreign governments as to move forward in AI, and this has to be a global issue. As a society, what is work as we move forward? COVID began this conversation for sure, but AI is going to exacerbate it. What does work look like? In my way of thinking, things like critical thinking, ethical analysis, strategic sense-making, these are the skills that you can't get from ChatGPT. It's about thinking differently in a new kind of way. So if those are my concerns, where am I optimistic? I think there's so much opportunity here at the state level. I was on a task force looking at AI at different levels of the university. You have no idea how much your faculty right down the way are doing in the area of AI, and it is absolutely, positively amazing. It is amazing what the faculty are doing with AI. It is progressive, and it stands toe-to-toe with things happening in the Valley. There's some really cool opportunities for tech transfer here. If we can engage between the university and the private sector and break the silo down and really engage, it's such an opportunity. It's an opportunity for my own kids from 14 to 18. My middle son, over spring break this year, developed his own large language model for fun. What does that tell you about how bright our students are? They can do this. The way that we moved towards certification and allowing programming to be a foreign language in high schools was a great move. And when I travel around, they recognize Louisiana for doing that. That is fantastic. We can do more because it'll present opportunities. Now you're going to say, well, why are you so optimistic about education? You keep talking about education. Well, is it just because it's going to protect your job? I'm tenured, I'm good. But that's not why. A little bit about myself as I start to draw this to a close. My grandparents were 6th grade educated farmers in Hungary. The Russians came in to take over my grandfather's farm, and he escaped into Germany. My dad was born in a displaced persons camp. They were then in Germany, where they spoke no English and they lived in the camp. In the 1950s, the Presbyterian Church of Pennsylvania came through, and they saw my father at age 2, and they said, you have to come to America. Right after all these issues were going on. They then came to rural Pennsylvania. My grandmother worked in the factory. She made Chef Boyardee pizza. My grandfather was a short-haul trucker. They spoke Yiddish. They weren't educated. My dad was the first ever to go to college. He got a master's degree at Virginia Tech, and he ended up working for NASA. In 2 generations, my grandfather listened to Hitler, and I'm now standing in front of you right now with a PhD, with all those opportunities and all the blessings that Piers read out to me. Education is the great equalizer. I see this in myself. I see this in my kids. And they've been able to have experiences and opportunities that I never knew possible. I believe in the power of education because it changed my family's life, and I want that to change my students' life as well. It drives what I do every day, but we can't do it alone. We need your help to do it, and there's so much opportunities. At the federal level, we're seeing the CHIPS Act. We're seeing all this investment in tech. That's how we're going to solve the problem of AI. And you know, maybe it's time we did think about this concept of work-life balance, where we start to think about that it's good that we go on vacation and check our emails, where we can't sit on a beach without checking emails. Maybe we do need to rethink that a bit. And maybe AI can do that. And I'm optimistic that it can. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you today. I'd be happy to address any questions. Hey, I made it on time. I'm impressed. But thank you so much. I appreciate it. I guess I'm supposed to say questions. Okay, questions. Yes?
You did not, you listed some of your fears. You did not list societal dependency on there and maybe a shift away from critical thinking. All I can think about is the movie Idiocracy. I don't know if you've seen that, but I mean, is that a concern of yours that critical thinking will sort of become maybe not a thing of the past, but greatly diminished?
Okay, so the question was, am I concerned about the role of critical thinking for society? Absolutely yes. And that's why you have two choices here with AI. And I tell this to faculty too. You either lean in or you lean out. And if you can choose to lean in, I lean in, meaning this. If you come to my class, we will use AI and we're going to teach you how to use it the right way. So the philosophical way to overcome it is to lean in, to understand it, to educate yourself, and then teach how not to become dependent upon it. Because I would argue when Wikipedia came out, you could have replaced AI with Wikipedia, and a lot of people had that same exact question. So I'm optimistic that if we can lean into it and educate people, that we'll be able to overcome that potential problem.
What about the challenge to AI through litigation? I believe the New York Times is bringing charges that it's a copyright infringement and...
Okay, so the question is, what about AI and litigation? Great question. If you look at the writer's strike right now in Hollywood, what is one of the things they're worried about? AI. Why? Copyrights. So, how do you overcome that issue? We have to start to talk about what copyright means and how to wall off certain types of copyright. It's interesting because if you look back historically, even e-commerce, if you look early on, we've all become so dependent upon things like Apple News and Google News. We're used to news being free, where they opened up the content for us for free. And so we've already started tinkering about copyright for a number of years, and this has the potential to make it worse. So I absolutely think it's an issue. How do we overcome that? This is where regulation and legislation has to play a role in order to do that. And I do have to be clear that I think legislation and regulation should not happen at the state levels, because as Montana has found out trying to regulate TikTok, that's a dangerous and hard road to go down. These issues have to happen at the federal level, because at the state level, there's just too many ways around them. Other questions as well?
Are you afraid of war games?
Am I afraid of war games? No, I'm not. Again, if you'd like to talk about this further, I'd be happy to have additional conversations, but thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.